This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
The X-Zone TV show with Rob McConnell is coming to screens of all sizes. UFOs, ghosts, alien abductions, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, angels, Bigfoot, unsolved mystery, and all subjects from within the world of the paranormal to the science of parapsychology and beyond. The X-Zone TV show with Rob McConnell, www.xzonetv.com, is a Relmar McConnell Media Company and Benedict Productions production.
Unwilling to be the government's deadly assassin, gifted psychic Kahara Mitchell went AWOL and ended up buried under rubble in the wake of a great tsunami. She regained consciousness far from Earth on the medical ship of a Daguerrean intergalactic fleet. Has she been rescued or abducted by aliens? The Chalice of Carrie, Kahira O'Donnell's latest paranormal science fiction romance, is the passionate story of an Earth woman and her destined mates, twin kings from another galaxy. Kahara uses her gifts fighting alongside Lords Rom and Ra in a war that will determine the destiny of galaxies. The Chalice of Carrie by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or at Amazon.com.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is professor and investigative writer Joan Mellen. We're going to be talking about, this name may ring a bell, Bill O'Reilly. And can you believe this? He lied. Shocking, isn't it, X-Zone Nation? Well, according to Politico, Fox News host Bill O'Reilly has repeatedly lied about being present at the suicide of Lee Harvey Oswald associate George S. DeMorenschild. The left-leaning watchdog group Media Matters alleged in a new report on February the 24th. In O'Reilly's book, Killing Kennedy, and several other appearances, O'Reilly said that he, as a reporter for the Dallas-based station WFAA-TV, was on the porch of DeMorenschild's daughter's house in Palm Beach, Florida, when he heard DeMorenschild shoot himself with a shotgun in March 1977. Two former colleagues of O'Reilly's at WFAA-TV told Media Matters O'Reilly was in Dallas at the time of the suicide. Joining me now to try and put some sense into an already controversial event, and that is the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, is Joan Mellen. And Professor Mellen, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you, Rob. Happy to be here.
Tell me, Professor, what is going on in the media today when you've got news anchors like Bill O'Reilly getting caught lying?
Well, I think it's a good thing that we caught him, for sure, because even if Fox News doesn't do anything about it, and his publisher, which is Henry Holt, doesn't do anything about it, it helps to raise the issue once more. And the issue is not Bill O'Reilly. He's not very interesting. He has never contributed anything to the research into the Kennedy assassination. But it draws everyone's attention to this very important figure in the story, George de Mohrenschildt, who was shooting himself upstairs, supposedly, because there's a strong argument that we can make that de Mohrenschildt was murdered, that he didn't shoot himself, that it was not a suicide. But, of course, O'Reilly always gives the official view of things, which has been disproved for the past 50 years or so. And I think it's really important that we look at this material once more, not sweep it under the rug, and not come out with the view that we will never know the truth.
Tell me,
This leads us to the truth.
Tell me, Professor, why, after all these years, is the Kennedy assassination such a topic of interest and conspiracy theories?
Well, the topic is of interest because people recognize that the Warren Report, which was supposedly telling us what really happened, is so full of holes. It's Swiss cheese, and if you take a poll, nobody believes it. Nobody believes Oswald acted alone. I did my research in the Kennedy assassination in New Orleans. I was investigating Jim Garrison's investigation. And Oswald had spent the summer of 1963 in New Orleans, so Garrison felt Oswald was in his jurisdiction, and since the Warren Commission wasn't going to tell the truth about it, he decided that he would investigate the story himself. And the first thing that he found was not only was Oswald not the lone assassin, but he was never alone. And not only was he never alone, but everyone that he was with had something to do with CIA. Well, it's a slight exaggeration because Oswald also worked with the FBI in New Orleans and also was involved with U.S. Customs down there. So he worked for several of the intelligence services. But the fact that Oswald worked for CIA leads us right to the same story, because George de Mohrenschildt, and he's been described on CNN and other places as a bon vivant and playboy and a raconteur. This is not George de Mohrenschildt. George de Mohrenschildt was in exile from Europe, from Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. They went to Poland and Belgium, and finally he came to the United States as a man for sale, really. And he worked for the CIA. And he worked for the CIA out of Dallas starting in 1957, and when he was sent by the field office down there in Dallas, and G. Walton Moore, to Yugoslavia, supposedly to help them look for oil. He had an MA degree in petroleum engineering, although he never found any oil wells, I think, in his whole life. He wasn't very good at it. What he was good was as an asset of the intelligence services. They sent him to Yugoslavia. The Yugoslavs turned him out. They threw him out. He was taking photographs and drawings of their various fortresses or whatever.
All right, Dr. Mellen, Professor Mellen, we have to take a 2-minute commercial break here. Please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour is professor and investigative writer Joan Mellen. Her website is www.joanmellen.com. That's Joan, Mellen.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute break. Don't go away. How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
The X-Zone TV show with Rob McConnell is coming to screens of all sizes. UFOs, ghosts, alien abductions, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, angels, Bigfoot, unsolved mystery, and all subjects from within the world of the paranormal to the science of parapsychology and beyond. The X-Zone TV show with Rob McConnell, www.xzonetv.com, is a Relmar McConnell Media Company and Benedict Productions production.
Welcome back, everyone. Professor Joan Mellen is our special guest this hour. She is the author of Our Man in Haiti. And for more information on Professor Mellen, www.joanmellen.com. All right, why don't you take us back to the day Kennedy was assassinated? We know where Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to have been in the Texas Book Depository. Was Oswald there? Was Oswald the shooter of who killed Kennedy?
Oswald did not shoot anyone. He did not shoot President Kennedy. He had no paraffin on his hands, which would indicate that he had fired a gun. He was there, somewhere there. Maybe he had been in the building where he worked as sort of a book person, putting packages from one place to another, a very menial job. He'd been down on the second floor getting a Coke out of the Coke machine, not at the sixth floor, as they say. And I found out more recently, even after my book, A Farewell to Justice, was published, I discovered that Oswald was actually outside on a break, and he was with another figure who's in the Garrison investigation, Thomas Edward Beckham. And Beckham had been a messenger to Dallas from New Orleans, and he had delivered some things to some soldiers of fortune, and he's chatting with Oswald right outside there, and they're drinking a Coke together. And I think that's interesting because Beckham doesn't appear in Oliver Stone's film because he didn't want to talk to them. He didn't want to be in it. People accused him of seeking notoriety, but he didn't. And so when they called him, they did track him down. He said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know anybody by that name," and he never did. But anyhow, I did get to talk to him in Louisville, and he's part of the story. He knew Oswald, and it's a whole other story of what was going on than what the Warren Commission came out with. It's just really a fan. Talking about the way you start your program with fiction is fact and so forth. Well, all the Warren Commission, the report is straight fiction. And everything that they said about Oswald, none of it is true. Oswald was a low-level intelligence agent, and I was going through George de Mohrenschild's history in the agency. Well, to make a long story short, G. Walton Moore, who was the head of the Dallas field office of CIA, asked de Mohrenschildt to keep an eye on Oswald. And that's how, George de Mohrenschildt was one of the biggest snobs in the world. He married these rich socialites. He died in this huge house, which belonged to the relative of one of his wives. And this was a person who would never in a million years have any relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald unless it was an assignment.
Based on
George de Mohrenschildt, the O'Reilly aspect here, George de Mohrenschildt is important because he, as a CIA asset, corresponds to Oswald as also a CIA asset, and de Mohrenschildt as Oswald's handler. Now, in April of 1963, Oswald moves to New Orleans. George de Mohrenschildt then goes to Haiti, so that George de Mohrenschildt is safely in Haiti when President Kennedy is killed. And then he comes back a year later for the Warren Commission. He testifies before the Warren Commission. But they made sure that he was not going to be in the United States. And when Oswald went to New Orleans, he picked up a handler, a CIA asset, who would take care of him there, and that was Clay Shaw, the person whom Garrison put on trial and for whom Garrison was accused of being unfair and all of this. But of course, he was guilty. Clay Shaw was exactly what Garrison said he was. And the only reason that Garrison really couldn't pursue it totally is that the JFK Act hadn't been passed until Oliver Stone's film was made in 1991 or so. And then the JFK Act was passed in 1992, and the agencies, FBI, CIA, they had to release the documents, as much anything that they had. And so this flood of 5 million documents is put in the National Archives. I went there to see and to reinvestigate the Garrison investigation. And what I found was every single document that I put my hands on confirmed Garrison's intuitions. He did a marvelous job on his investigation of the Kennedy assassination. And Garrison's view was that CIA's footprints were everywhere in this crime. George de Mohrenschildt, and Bill O'Reilly he certainly knew that George de Mohrenschildt was an important figure in this, or else he would not have inserted himself into the de Mohrenschildt story. Now, the other thing is that in my book, Our Man in Haiti, I interviewed a person named Joe Dreyer, who lives in Palm Beach, and who knew de Mohrenschildt in Haiti. And so George de Mohrenschildt, by 1977, is very nervous, very upset. He's coming to the end of his life, and he has decided really to talk. So when he got to Palm Beach, he called up Joe Dreyer, who was living there at the time. He left Haiti. Nobody could function under Duvalier and all that. And he says, Joe, I want to talk. I have something I want to tell you. I want to talk about. And how about lunch today, the very day? Now, Dreyer said, no, I'm busy today, whatever. And so they make a date for the day after George de Mohrenschildt ultimately dies. Well, if he has a lunch date with Joe Dreyer, it shows he's not about to commit suicide. He's ready to talk. And then the same day that de Mohrenschildt was killed, Gayton Fonzie appeared at his door. Gayton Fonzie was the chief investigator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Gayton Fonzie leaves his card because George de Mohrenschildt is being interviewed by another CIA asset, and that was Edward J. Epstein, who was a writer and who was working for Reader's Digest, which was in the agency produce since 1947, when Reader's Digest picked up the story of the agency's first operation in Europe, which was called Operation Gladio. It's a long, involved story. So anyway, Joe Dreyer was convinced that de Mohrenschildt had to have been murdered. And Dreyer was a very sophisticated man. He was in U.S. Marine Intelligence. He knew all the agencies. He knew everyone. And he was very shrewd, and he figured he would never have killed himself if he was ready to finally talk after everybody tried to get him to talk all these years. And Joe Dreyer went over, and he found out that the maid in the house where de Mohrenschildt was staying heard a car drive off shortly after the gunshot. Plus, the guns didn't have any ammunition in that house. He never used guns. He didn't like guns. So when you look at I heard this lesson on Law and Order. They said 90% of cases the evidence is circumstantial. Well, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming that de Mohrenschildt was murdered.
Why was he murdered?
He was murdered because he was going to talk. And what he was going to say was, number one, his own history with CIA, which he never talked about ever. Number two, how Oswald fit into that. Oswald's history with CIA. Why CIA knew about Oswald and was interested in Oswald at least a year, if not longer, before the assassination. They never admitted that. To this day, they haven't admitted that.
They've never admitted that Lee Harvey Oswald was actually a CIA operative.
Yes, they never have admitted that, and that he was part of a false defector program.
Mm-hmm.
When he so-called defected to the Soviet Union, I think it was in 1959, he was part of a counterintelligence CIA program. He was not a Marxist. It's ludicrous. There's no Marxist that acts the way he did. And so he associated with anti-Castro Cubans and all of that. And I mean, I have so much evidence; it's overwhelming. When Oswald went up to in Louisiana, he went to get a job. His CIA assignment was to get employment at the East Louisiana State Hospital at Jackson, and he was taken up there with by Clay Shaw and this other character, a CIA contract pilot named David Ferry. And the head of the hospital I interviewed, who's long gone now, wonderful man, a Cuban actually, Dr. Frank Silva, passed the room where Oswald is holding at the hospital. Silva's the medical director of the hospital, and Oswald is holding forth about how he's going to go down to Cuba and kill Castro, and ranting and raving and making a big spectacle of himself for reasons we don't really know. And Dr. Silva just looks in and he says, "No way that man is going to get a job in my hospital." Well, that ended that. Now, Garrison there's no proof of why he was sent up there. Garrison's theory, and this is a theory, and that is that Oswald would get a job at the hospital. Somehow he'd act up, because part of his program here is to act as if he's crazy. He would be then made into a patient. He would then escape from the hospital, wind up in Dealey Plaza as an escaped mental patient. And there you have the crazy lone assassin. It would have worked very well. Because even when the Warren Report describes him, they described him as mentally handicapped. So that part was already in place. So if you put all these details together, you can really see what was going on there. DeMorchil played his part in this story.
All right, why was Kennedy assassinated?
That's another story. Kennedy was assassinated. Well, why? One of the soldiers of fortune, wise guy, close to the agency, said to me, Kennedy was the last president who thought he could take power. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the situation today, you can see we have a president that doesn't have any power whatsoever. And it's not that the Congress has taken it away from him, it's others. So Kennedy realized that CIA was making policy. They were assassinating people without his permission. Trujillo, Diem. I mean, he gave the okay to overthrow Diem, not to kill him. And then, of course, the agency had that history of assassinating foreign leaders like Mossadegh in Iran and President Arbenz in Guatemala. All this leads up to the Kennedy times. And so he sees that the agency is out of control, and he says, and then they went to Cuba. The agency sent people to Cuba to find out about the Soviet missiles, and they tell a senator, Kenneth Keating of New York, all of what they found. They don't tell the president. CIA just bypassed him. So he's furious. He says, I'm going to get those bastards if it's the last thing I do. Well, it was the last thing he did. And President Truman, when he wrote that famous op-ed piece a month after the assassination in December of 1963, he writes that the agency has gotten out of control. He didn't intend when he created CIA, well, he didn't really create it, it was Allen Dulles, but Truman was president at the time. He said they're running a shadow government. I never intended that they would be doing what they're doing, and too late, of course, as far as President Kennedy was concerned. But he's told, how come President Truman, in talking about the assassination, is talking about the power that CIA has taken upon itself?
Interesting. Professor, please stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Professor Joan Mellen is our special guest this hour. We're talking about her book entitled All right, do you have your pencils and paper ready? Because here it comes. Our Man in Haiti, her website is joanmellen.com. That's Joan, Mellon.com. Mellen.com. And Professor Mellen and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, if you'd like to listen to us 7/24/365, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away.
The X Zone TV show with Rob McConnell is coming to screens of all sizes. UFOs, ghosts, alien abductions, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, angels, Bigfoot, unsolved mystery, and all subjects from within the world of the paranormal to the science of parapsychology and beyond. The X Zone TV show with Rob McConnell, www.xzonetv.com, is a Relmar McConnell Media Company and Benedict Productions production.
Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Professor Joan Mellen is our special guest this hour. We're talking about the professor's new book entitled Our Man in Haiti. First of all, Professor, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Very interesting information. And what was it that prompted you to do such an in-depth investigation into the Kennedy assassination?
That's a good question, Rob. Well, I knew Jim Garrison.
Oh.
I met Jim Garrison way back in 1969. My husband had sent him some articles from an Italian newspaper called Paese Sera which had run a story about a CIA front, really, in Europe called Permindex.
Mm-hmm.
And on the board of directors was Clay Shaw, the very person that Garrison had that very month indicted for the participation in the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. So now this was May of 1969. The Shaw trial was in January,
Mm-hmm.
and it was over, and Garrison had lost, and he invited us to New Orleans, and of course to talk. And we just talked the whole weekend, and I got to know him. He wanted to be a writer. His big ambition, people think he wanted notoriety involving the Kennedy investigation. It wasn't true. What he wanted was to be a fiction writer. And what happened finally was he published 3 books, one of which was a novel. Anyway, which my husband sold for him to a publisher, and so we got to know Garrison pretty well. And the last time I saw him was in 1987. He died in 1990, I believe, or 91. And the film was in the works. Oliver Stone's film was in the works, and he was not feeling very well at that point. And he, the last year of his life, he was in bed. He was bedridden.
Oh, no.
But he never gave up believing that the truth would come out. And the New Orleans investigators for the House Select Committee,
Mm-hmm.
Robert Buras and L.J. Delsa, they became very discouraged by the House Select Committee and its corruption, and it's being controlled by CIA. I gave a speech at a conference last September regarding how CIA had so controlled that investigation that and nothing true could ever come out of it. And we heard Robert Blakey, who was the chief counsel for a House Select Committee just this past September at that conference, and he hasn't learned anything since the late 1970s, and it was really very discouraging.
What do
Anyway,
you think will be?
Garrison, yeah.
What do you think will be the outcome of the JFK assassination? Do you think the truth will ever come out? Do you think that those responsible will be identified and that there will be some sort of repercussion within the CIA based on the information? No. So it's a dead issue.
Well, the thing is that people who think that people on their deathbeds are finally going to tell the truth are really mistaken most of the time. They don't. Richard Helms died. He was the CIA director at the time of the Garrison investigation. They die with their secrets. And the people who were involved, such as David Atlee Phillips, Richard Helms, the chief legal officer for CIA, Lawrence Houston, those people are gone now. So who's going to come forward and tell the truth? And I think the idea that there are documents that they are still going to be released in 2017 and that these documents will tell the truth, I don't think so. I don't think you put these kinds of things on paper. And if you did put anything on paper, that's been long gone. No. I don't think that we're going to get... We have a lot of the truth. We don't have the whole truth, but we have a lot of the truth. People have trouble accepting what we do know.
But if
I'm telling you, the things I say, they're from documents
mm-hmm.
or eyewitnesses. And I know eyewitnesses are fallible, but still, we have a lot of information. The idea really is the mass media in the United States. I'm speaking to Canada, so you're exempt. The mass media in the United States are not willing to open this issue up. I can't get my big book on Garrison, A Farewell to Justice, or even Our Man in Haiti. By the way, I should give the subtitle of my book, Our Man in Haiti. It's George de Mohrenschildt and the CIA in the Nightmare Republic. And the Nightmare Republic is a phrase that Graham Greene used to describe Haiti in his book, The Comedians. Well, these books are not going to be reviewed in the New York Times. I'm not going to get on CNN, I doubt it, or even Morning Joe,
mm-hmm.
or even that's cable TV or network TV. You're not going to. They don't want to talk about it. There are certain words that are taboo on these programs. One of them is Kennedy assassination. Another one is CIA. Even when CIA was in the news regarding the torture memos and their refusal to release these memos and
mm-hmm.
all of that, it's never reported. We just find out in little drips and drabs about these things.
So let me ask you this. If nobody basically cares, and I'm talking about those in the position who could actually make a difference. If nobody cares in mainstream media in the United States, why pursue it?
That's a great question. Don't you think I think of that every day of my life? I say I'm telling the truth, and no one wants to hear it. And you know, the next sentence is, there's a hole in your heart. It really hurts. You're trying so hard, and there's no one listening. And it's not only the media, but it's also the people who are very much influenced by the media, and especially the people, the invincible ignorance of the listeners of Fox News that don't want to hear anything that's not truly the official version of things. So that's why it's sort of, delightful, if you like, that here's Bill O'Reilly really with his pants down. He's caught out as a fraud. And that's helpful a little bit, but still it doesn't make people want to know the truth anymore, I don't think.
But if Bill O'Reilly...
I don't know the answer to that. You have to do it for history. You're working for history, and the hope that someday some future generations may take this up and explore it in a fresh way without any of the preconceived notions that we've had now.
But if Bill O'Reilly has been caught with his pants down more than one time,
yes,
why do people still listen to him? Why do they take his word as the word of a media god?
He's an entertainer. He's fun. He attacks people. He prevents them from talking on his show, shuts them up. He's flamboyant. He's he's sort of like a snake oil salesman in the old Western movies.
Yeah.
Like a charlatan, like one of these preachers. I don't know. And it's fun to watch him. It's sort of titillating. It's it's sort of semi-porno in a way. So that's why it has nothing to do with people who watch him don't want the truth. That's a contradiction, because he wouldn't give you the truth. And there was a long line of people that have been enlisted to sort of obfuscate on the Kennedy assassination. O'Reilly is one. Another one was Vincent Bugliosi, published a 1,000-page book with a good publisher, W.W. Norton. Now, don't tell me that Norton would publish that book full of lies and misunderstandings and pay for it. And then there was someone called Gerald Posner who did the same thing for Random House. And I happen to know for a fact that his editor's name was Robert Loomis, was a CIA asset at Random House. That's known. He admitted it.
So are you basically...
To a friend of mine who was sitting there waiting with him at Random House.
All right, hold on here.
CIA commissioned his book.
Hold on here. Let's just take a deep breath. Because you made a Reader's Digest connection to the CIA. You've made a Random House connection to the CIA. Are you trying to tell the world tonight here on our show that not only are publishing houses involved in the CIA, but would you also say that the CIA is involved in mainstream media as well?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you something. CIA issued a memo on April 4th, 1967, which was, to its media assets, how to answer critics of the Warren Report. In other words, they have their media assets. They said that as soon as Garrison announced his investigation, they sent a huge number of people out there to infiltrate his office in order to steal documents, tell lies, provoke, destroy the investigation. I don't think they succeeded, but they tried. Of course. I'm not original with this.
Right.
You should look at my book, The Great Game in Cuba, where one of these, a very distinguished Cuban, anti-Castro now, not left-wing, who comes to the United States in Castro's prison on the Isle of Pines. His name is Gustavo de los Reyes, and he lived to a ripe old age of 100 here in the U.S. So he's in prison on the Isle of Pines. Horrible. He comes back. He gets out through various ways. Very rich, very just top of the society, and he wants to write an article. Excuse me.
Sure.
For about what happened to him. It's suggested to him to write it for Reader's Digest. Reader's Digest then sends 3 CIA figures, whose names are in my book, to edit his manuscript. And they cut out this, they cut out that, they cut out how Alan Dulles was insulting to Gustavo. Gustavo, when he was part of a plot to overthrow Castro. He goes to see Allen Dulles, comes to the U.S., goes to see Allen Dulles. This is before Castro imprisoned him, of course. And he asks Allen Dulles for help. Doesn't CIA want to overthrow Castro? So Dulles says, how much money do you want? Gustavo then says, we don't need your money. We're just here to tell you what we're going to do. And at that point, Dulles says, well, you're going to be in the cemetery. You're not going to survive this. If he had accepted the money, CIA would have supported their efforts. CIA's business was to control. They control here, they control there. They didn't want to have people overthrow Castro whom they didn't control. Then Cuba would be run by other people that they couldn't control, and except for Castro. So then Dulles then calls up the American ambassador in Cuba, and they tell the Cuban government about the plot. Then the people it's called the Cattleman's Plot. It's in my book, The Great Game in Cuba. The Great Game is CIA. They get arrested. Castro then, he puts Gustavo on the list of people to be executed, along with others that were involved in the plot. Now comes the head of King Ranch. Gustavo had very powerful friends. They hire a lawyer, and he goes in and he explains to Castro, and I have a photograph of that on the cover of the book, that he had represented some Cubans who had been running guns during the 26th of July movement, which was Castro's movement. So in deference to that, Castro takes Gustavo's name off the list of people to be killed and just puts him in prison for the next, I think he served 4 years in the prison. Whoa. Now, this is, so Reader's Digest then doesn't want to print Gustavo's story. They want it their way. They want to edit. They want to, and Gustavo is horrified. He thinks this was a free country.
Right.
He's very rich and aristocratic. He doesn't stand for this. He goes back to the head of King Ranch, his friend Robert J. Clayburgh Jr., and he says, I won't publish it. And Clayburgh says, well, if they publish any of it, it's to the good. Nobody fights for the CIA. The people who are in the know and who are really in power know you can't argue with them. And so the article did appear. But it's an interesting story about Reader's Digest. And I heard all of this from Gustavo himself, because he was one of my big sources for my book about Cuba. That was very interesting for me. I'm a person that in the 1960s, you would have thought I'd be a supporter of Fidel and Che. But not when I talk to these people and these Cubans and what they've been through. I changed my views, I have to say.
All right, so let me just reiterate it and get you to confirm or deny the following statements. Clay Shaw was a CIA asset.
There's no question about it. CIA's History Review Group released a document. This was after A Farewell to Justice was published, which stated Clay Shaw was a highly paid contract source of CIA. Highly paid. Those are the key words.
All right.
So everything Garrison thought was true.
Okay, so Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset operative, and Lee Harvey Oswald was not the shooter in the Kennedy assassination. Is that right?
Absolutely. First of all, Kennedy, the death shot was from the front. That's been established by the Zapruder film. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Kennedy's head was blown off from the front, and then they had to reconstruct the head and the face, which they did. And that's another story that I'm telling in another book that I'm writing right now, how that happened. But yes, even if Oswald were shooting, which he wasn't, it wasn't anyone in that book depository.
Okay, taking into account that you've told us tonight that the CIA has operatives in Reader's Digest, Random House, major media outlets in the U.S. Is it safe to say then, or it would appear to me that it's safe to say, that the CIA is the shadow government?
Yes. Now I want to ask you a question,
Sure.
Rob. Does this seem unusual or outlandish to you?
After doing this
Do you
show...
think what I'm saying is so unusual?
After doing this show for 23 years and talking to over 3,800 people on every topic under the sun, it is totally plausible in my opinion.
Thank you. I just was wondering because to me it's ABC, but I'm living in some kind of a ivory tower in a way, because I know that it's very hard, given the newspapers and magazines, it's very hard, except in the alternative media and magazines and so forth, for these views to be heard, expressed. And it just makes me think how glad I am to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Well, we're glad you're with us, Professor. Please stand by. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. Exo Nation, our very special guest this hour is Professor Joan Mellen. And her website is www.joanmellen.com. That's joanmellen.com. And she is the author of Our Man in Haiti, George de Mohrenschildt's and the CIA in the Nightmare Republic. It's published by Trinde. And the professor and I will be back on the other side of this very short break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, you can always listen to the X Zone radio show on your telephone or on your cell phone by dialing 213-401-0080. Don't go away. We'll be back shortly.
What if someone told you you could live to be 120? Would you believe him? What if he told you the Bible guaranteed it? All you needed to do was follow his rules and buy his products. Would you do it? What if you invested 20 years of your life in him? What if he tested his substances on your child? What if your child became brain damaged as a result? Meet Dr. Tyler Belknap, a fast-talking Texas admin turned health guru. At the helm of a vast health food and supplement empire, he has established himself as the authority on nutrition and longevity. But what his followers don't know is that his products are laced with bizarre psychoactive substances from genetically modified plants developed in his very own secret lab. No wonder his customers can't stop using them. Tyler Belknap will stop at nothing to keep his edge in the market, even if it means experimenting on children. Chasing 120, a story of food, faith, fraud, and the pursuit of longevity, a novel from the pen of political cartoonist Monty Wolverton, is an easy and entertaining read full of rich characters and intrigue. It hits home in a world filled with all kind of hucksterism and offers a glimpse of what can happen when GMO technology falls into the wrong hands. Chasing 120 by Monty Wolverton. Get your copy today at www.ptm.org/120 or on Amazon.com.
Nita Hickok is an expert in exorcisms, psychic warfare, soul healing, angelology, soul retrieval, demonology, energy healing, long-distance healing, astral healing, and much more. Nita is an interfaith minister because she believes all gods and goddesses are valid and that they are part of one divine force that is incomprehensible to us who are incarnated upon this earth. Nita has been doing astral healing, distant healing, spirit release, exorcism, house cleansing and blessings, soul restoring and revival, psychic vampire removal and curse removal, and much more for over 40 years. For more information or to contact Nita Hickok, visit her website at www.astralhealer.com. That's www.astralhealer.com.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Professor Joan Mellen is our special guest this hour. www.joanmellen.com. That's MELLEN.com. And first of all, Professor Mellen, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. And thank you for all the great work that you've done in trying to set the record straight when it comes to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and the hand that the CIA had in the assassination and still has in the mainstream media that so many people take, everything for, verbatim. And of course, for setting the record straight on Bill O'Reilly. There's something you want to say to our audience,
yes,
Professor?
Just one thing I want to say. I teach creative writing at Temple University in Philadelphia, and my absolute favorite writer, whom I teach every semester, is Alice Munro. And that was many, many years before she won the Nobel Prize. But here's a Canadian writer that's everybody's most respected short story writer ever. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for that, Professor.
Alice Munro.
All right. What would you like to leave the listening audience of the worldwide X-Zone Nation with tonight, Professor?
Well, I would wish that people, if they're interested in these ideas, that they would read as much as they can, that they would write to the television stations and media programs that they like, and ask that these views be heard. I think that would be a help for us, because it's really very difficult to convince these. They're so frightened and so timid, and we call ourselves a democracy, but it's very hard to get alternate dissenting views heard. And we'd say, there are countries that are not democracies, Soviet Union, Russia, whatever. But here in our country, it is just as difficult maybe as in any other place. Very, very difficult not to be politically correct, not to take the official view of things, and to ask what happened in such an important event as the Kennedy assassination. What really happened?
Now, where are your books available, Professor?
The best place is Amazon.com, because, bookstores are dying out. People are not reading. Bookstores are closing. We lost all our border stores. So the best place really to get books now easily is, and they send it to you, Amazon.com. And all my books are there.
So how many books have you got now?
How many books have I written? Maybe 20.
My good gosh.
20. And I just finished one. And it's just a struggle. Every book is a struggle. I'm writing one about Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson's role in the attack on an American surveillance ship, a spy ship, called the USS Liberty during the Six-Day War.
Now, wasn't that the action that actually brought the United States into the Vietnam War under these?
No, not you're thinking of the Gulf of Tonkin.
That's right.
Similar
Yeah.
incident, which is similar. But this is an American surveillance ship that was in the Eastern Mediterranean on June 8th, 1967, and suddenly the sailors are fired on. Rockets, machine guns, napalm thrown on them, and they're trying to, some enemy, and you couldn't see who they were at first. The planes were blacked over, are trying to sink the ship and everybody on it, and they're non-combatants. They were not armed really, and so they're just sitting ducks, and they get attacked. And then I won't tell the whole story, but at one point in the story, the Sixth Fleet, the admirals decide the ship gets a distress call out to the Sixth Fleet. The admiral sends out planes to help, excuse me, and Lyndon Johnson calls them back.
Well, we'll have to have you back on the show, Professor. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much once again for all the great work that you've done. And
thank you, Rob.
It's been a pleasure,
Thank
Professor.
Thank you for having me on.
It's been my pleasure, ma'am. Exonation Professor Joan Mellen has been my guest this hour. Her website, www.joanmellen.com. That's Joan, MELLEN.com. To find out how you can purchase her books through Amazon, simply go on Amazon and in the search engine type Joan Mellen. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.